At 9:17 on Thanksgiving morning, my husband texted me from the grocery store. Set 3 places. Brooke's coming. Don't embarrass me by making this ugly. I was standing in our kitchen in Richmond, Virginia, with pie dough under my fingernails and a turkey roasting in the oven. In the inner pocket of my leather work bag, there was a sealed DNA report with Grant Morgan's name on it. He thought I was cooking dinner for him and his mistress. He had no idea I was preparing the last meal he would ever eat in our house as my husband. My name is Lila Morgan. I was 39 years old that November, and I worked as a tax preparer for a small accounting firm downtown. I had spent most of my adult life helping other people understand what their money said about them. People lied with words every day. Their accounts almost never did. That was why I noticed the transfers before I understood the betrayal. That was why I kept copies before Grant had a chance to erase anything. And that was why, when he finally decided to bring another woman into my kitchen, I was already several steps ahead of him. Grant and I had been married for 13 years. From the outside, we looked steady. He sold commercial real estate, wore tailored suits, laughed too loudly at charity dinners, and called everyone friend when he wanted something. I was the quieter half of our marriage. I handled our bills, our taxes, the repairs, the holiday plans, the birthday gifts for his mother, and every little thing that made our life look effortless. Grant liked to say that I was good at the boring stuff. He said it like praise. For years I accepted it that way. The first time he used the word family against me, we had only been married 3 months. His sister needed money after another bad breakup, and Grant took $800 from our savings without asking. When I confronted him, he leaned against the kitchen counter and smiled like I was being unreasonable. "You don't turn your back on family, Leela," he said. "That's not who we are." I apologized before the night was over. I told myself marriage meant compromise. I did not yet understand that Grant's version of compromise always involved me giving something up. Over time, he became skilled at making my discomfort sound selfish. When he missed anniversaries, it was because his clients depended on him. When he spent weekends networking, I was supposed to be proud that he was ambitious. When he started coming home smelling like unfamiliar perfume, he said I watched too many dramas. "You're turning normal life into an accusation," he told me once, slipping off his wedding ring before showering. "You always need a problem to solve." I remember staring at that ring on the bathroom counter and feeling something inside me become very still. Brooke Ellis entered our lives almost 2 years before that Thanksgiving. She was hired as a temporary coordinator at Grant's office, a woman with glossy dark hair, a practiced laugh, and the kind of polished confidence that made people assume she belonged wherever she stood. Grant introduced her at a company dinner and kept one hand resting lightly at the small of her back while he told me she was basically a kid. Brooke was 34. She looked directly at me when she smiled, as though she wanted me to know she had already measured the room. At first, Grant said I was imagining things. Brooke texted him late because she was inexperienced and needed guidance. Brooke called him during dinner because she had anxiety around her job. Brooke needed rides home because her car was unreliable. Every explanation sounded almost reasonable by itself. Together, they built a wall around my marriage, one excuse at a time. And every time I asked a question, Grant made me feel ashamed for asking it. He did not deny his behavior. He made me doubt my right to react to it. Then I found the transfers. They began as small payments from our joint checking account, amounts that could disappear inside groceries and utilities if someone was not paying close attention. $400, $750, $1,200. The recipient was listed as Dane Family Care LLC. Grant told me it was an investment connected to a client. I asked for paperwork. He said I did not understand his business. I asked again. He did not speak to me for 3 days. And when he finally did, he told me I was humiliating him by treating him like a criminal. But I was good at my job. I knew how to follow patterns. I knew how to compare dates, locate filings, and recognize when someone tried to bury a trail beneath vague descriptions. Dane Family Care LLC had no legitimate business presence. No storefront, no invoices, no client records, just a mailbox rental outside Petersburg and a bank account receiving deposits from my husband. I printed every statement. I saved them in a folder marked quarterly tax notes. Because Grant never looked at anything he assumed was dull. The next clue came from a pharmacy receipt in Grant's coat pocket. It was folded into quarters and smelled faintly of his cologne. The purchase was not for him. It included pediatric fever medicine, cough syrup, and a small box of dinosaur bandages. I stood in our laundry room holding that receipt while the dryer turned behind me. Grant and I had never had children. Not because I did not want them, but because every time I raised the subject he said the timing was wrong. The market was unstable, or we were not ready financially. When I asked him about the receipt, he barely looked up from his phone. Brooke's daughter was sick, he said. She was panicking, so I helped. Then he added, "You should try being compassionate for once." That sentence stayed with me. Not because it hurt. By then I was too tired for it to hurt the way it once had. It stayed with me because Grant always used morality as a weapon when he needed to hide something selfish. Compassion, loyalty, family, respect. He kept changing the words. But the demand never changed. I did not confront him again. I started listening instead. I noticed he left the house every other Wednesday at the same time, claiming he had late meetings. I noticed he used cash for gas on those nights. I noticed that Brooke's social media disappeared completely after I viewed it once. And I noticed that Grant began locking the drawer in his home office even though he had never cared about privacy before. He thought secrecy meant putting a lock on a desk. He forgot that I was the person who had organized every document in that house. The key was in the old brass bowl by the front door attached to a ring of keys Grant had not used in years. He had bought a new lock and assumed I would never notice the replacement key, but I had spent 13 years noticing the things he dismissed. I waited until he was in Atlanta for a conference, then opened the drawer. Inside were property brochures, loose receipts, a second phone, and a cream-colored envelope with a private laboratory logo printed in the corner. My hands started shaking before I even touched it. The report inside was dated 6 weeks earlier. It listed Grant Morgan as the alleged father and Brooke Ellis's daughter, Maisie Dane, as the child tested. The probability of paternity was higher than 99%. I read the page 3 times because my mind kept trying to make the words change. Maisie was 8 years old. 8 years ago, Grant and I had been renovating this house. 8 years ago, he told me we could not afford fertility treatment. 8 years ago, he held me while I cried and said someday we would have the family we deserved. I sat on the floor of his office with that report in my lap until the sun went down. I did not scream. I did not throw anything. I did not call Brooke because I already knew what Grant would say if I did. He would say she had trapped him. He would say he had made mistakes. He would say I was cruel for involving a child in adult pain. And then somehow, by the end of the conversation, he would expect me to comfort him for what he had done to me. Instead, I photographed every page. I copied the transfers. I forwarded records from our shared accounts to an email address Grant did not know I had. Then I called a woman named Dana Rusk, an attorney I had met years earlier when she brought her taxes to our office. Dana did not ask me why I had waited so long. She did not tell me marriage was hard. She listened until I finished, then said, "Do not give him a warning he has not earned." It was the first useful thing anyone had said to me in months. Dana helped me understand what Grant had done with our money. The transfers were not just support. He had been using marital funds to pay Brooke's rent, her daughter's school expenses, medical bills, and a vehicle lease he claimed belonged to a client. He had built another household behind my back while asking me to cut grocery costs and postpone repairs in our own home. He had told me we could not replace the cracked kitchen floor because we needed to be responsible. Meanwhile, he was paying for Brooke's new apartment 15 minutes away. By the time Thanksgiving arrived, Dana had prepared the divorce papers. They were not dramatic. They were clean, precise, and painfully ordinary. Asset disclosures, bank records, a request to preserve financial documents, a notice that I would no longer be responsible for protecting Grant from the consequences of his choices. I kept the papers in a slim folder beside the DNA report. I had not planned to serve them on Thanksgiving. I had planned to leave quietly after the holiday. Because I still believed quietness could save me from becoming the villain in Grant's story. Then his text arrived. Set 3 places. Brooke's coming. Don't embarrass me. A few minutes later, Grant walked through the front door, carrying 2 bottles of expensive wine and acting as though he had brought home flowers. He kissed the air beside my cheek, glanced at the turkey and said, "Good. You made enough." I looked at him in the reflection of the oven door. He was wearing the navy sweater I had bought him for our anniversary. He looked relaxed, pleased with himself, like a man who believed he had arranged the entire day around his own comfort. "Brooke had nowhere else to go," he said, setting the wine on the counter. "Her mother is visiting family and Maisie is with her grandmother. It would be cruel to leave Brooke alone today." I said nothing. Grant mistook my silence for surrender and continued arranging plates on the dining room table. Just be normal, he added. This is Thanksgiving. I need you to act like an adult. Then he looked over his shoulder and smiled at me. Wear something nice. I want this to feel like family. The doorbell rang at 11:43. Grant straightened his sweater before he opened it. I stood in the kitchen with flour on my hands, a pie cooling on the counter, and the folder hidden beneath the stack of linen napkins. Brooke's voice floated in from the hallway, soft and familiar. Grant laughed too warmly at something she said. For one last second I felt the old instinct rise in me, the instinct to make peace, to swallow pain, to keep the room calm for everyone else. Then I picked up the dessert plates. Brooke stepped into my hallway, wearing a cream sweater dress and the same gold earrings I had seen in the background of one of Grant's office selfies. She carried a bakery box tied with a red ribbon, like she had been invited to a friendly neighborhood potluck instead of the home of the woman whose husband had been paying her rent in secret. Her eyes landed on me for half a second. There was no apology in them, only caution. Then Grant took her coat, touched her elbow, and led her toward the dining room, as if I were the caterer he had hired. Lila made everything from scratch, Grant told her. She goes all out for Thanksgiving. He said it proudly as though my labor proved something good about him. Brooke gave me a small, uncomfortable smile. That's really thoughtful, she said. I wanted to ask whether she thought it was thoughtful when he used our money to fill her refrigerator. I wanted to ask if she remembered which nights he left our bed to tuck her daughter into hers, but I only nodded and returned to the kitchen. The turkey needed basting, the rolls needed 20 more minutes, the sweet potatoes were beginning to brown around the edges exactly the way Grant liked them. That ordinary domestic precision was almost unbearable. I had spent so many holidays trying to make our home feel warm enough that Grant might finally settle into it. I had believed a well-set table could repair the distance between two people. That morning I understood something simple and ugly. I had been decorating a lie while he used the room behind me to build another life. Grant came into the kitchen carrying his wineglass before noon. You're being weird, he said quietly. Brooke was in the dining room pretending to admire the framed photographs along the wall. This is awkward for everyone, Lila. Don't make it worse. I looked at him over the counter. Worse than bringing your employee to Thanksgiving without asking me. He exhaled sharply the way he did when he wanted to make himself look exhausted by my feelings. She's not just an employee, you know that. I know more than you think, I said. For the first time that day, Grant's face changed. Only slightly. His mouth tightened and his eyes moved to the doorway as though he was checking whether Brooke could hear us. Then he lowered his voice. We have talked about this. Things have been difficult between us for a long time. It was a sentence he had rehearsed. I could hear that immediately. He had likely said it to Brooke, to himself, maybe even to friends who never bothered to ask what difficult really meant. We talked about you coming home after midnight, I said. We talked about the money. We talked about you disappearing every Wednesday. You called me controlling. Grant placed his glass on the counter with more force than necessary. Because you made every conversation into an interrogation. You never trusted me. His expression softened into something almost wounded. Brooke understands me. She doesn't punish me for being honest about how unhappy I've been. It was almost impressive the way he could take 13 years of deception and lay it at my feet like a bill I had failed to pay. I felt the old reflex try to wake up inside me, the reflex that made me explain, apologize, shrink. But I had spent the previous 6 weeks looking at numbers, dates, receipts, and records. I knew exactly how long his lies had lasted. I knew what they had cost. And I knew that unhappy people did not secretly fund second households with money their spouses believed was being saved for roof repairs. I took the turkey from the oven. The skin was crisp and golden, and the kitchen filled with the scent of rosemary and butter. Grant watched me carve it, probably waiting for a scene that would justify every story he had told about me. I gave him nothing. I arranged the slices on a platter and carried them to the table. Brooke stood when I entered, perhaps out of manners, perhaps out of guilt. I could not tell. Grant pulled out her chair before he sat down. There were 3 place settings. I had used our wedding china. That was deliberate. The plates had been a gift from my Aunt Marlene, who had told me when I opened the box, use the good things. Don't save them for people who don't deserve them. For years I saved those plates for birthdays, holidays, and the occasional dinner party Grant insisted would help his career. That Thanksgiving I set one in front of the woman who had taken part in breaking my marriage, and one in front of the man who had expected me to serve them both. Grant raised his glass first. To new beginnings, he said. He looked at Brooke, then at me. And to honesty, finally. Brooke's fingers tightened around her wine stem. I watched the red wine tremble near the rim. That's an interesting toast, I said. Grant gave me a warning look. Lila. I lifted my own glass but did not drink. To honesty, I repeated. It really does have a way of showing up when people least expect it. Dinner began with the kind of small talk people use when they know they are standing too close to an open flame. Brooke complimented the green beans. Grant told a story about a client who had embarrassed himself at a negotiation. I asked Brooke whether Maisie still liked dinosaurs. The room went quiet so quickly that I heard the clock above the fireplace ticking. Brooke looked down at her plate. Grant's eyes locked on mine. What does that have to do with anything? He asked. Nothing, I said, passing the cranberry sauce. I just noticed the bandages. Brooke's cheeks went pale. Grant put down his fork. You went through my things. His voice rose just enough that he could pretend I had committed the larger offense. I had expected that. People like Grant never feared what they had done as much as they feared being seen doing it. You brought your private life into our home, I said. You do not get to act shocked that I noticed. Grant, Brooke said softly, maybe we should go. He turned toward her at once, protective and irritated. No, we're not leaving because Lila wants to turn a holiday into a trial. Then he looked back at me. I told you Brooke was important to me. You knew there was more going on. It was a cruel kind of honesty, the kind that arrives only after someone has already taken everything they wanted. He wanted credit for admitting the affair now, as though confession erased the years of lies that had made it possible. You told me she was someone you were helping, I said. I was helping her, he snapped. Her situation is complicated. I looked at Brooke, then really looked at her. She had stopped eating. Her hands rested in her lap, hidden beneath the table. For a moment I saw something beyond the anger I felt toward her. I saw fear. Maybe she had known Grant was married but not known how much he had hidden. Maybe she had agreed to be his secret because he had promised her a future. Or maybe she had believed every word he said, because believing him was easier than facing who he really was. Complicated, I repeated. That is one word for it. Grant leaned back in his chair. What do you want from me, Lila? You want me to pretend I don't care about Brooke? You want me to pretend I haven't been miserable? He sounded almost desperate now, but it was not remorse. It was frustration. He was angry because I would not perform the role he had assigned me. He wanted me to rage so he could call me unstable. He wanted me to cry so he could call me dramatic. He wanted me to forgive him so he could call himself decent. I want you to stop lying, I said. His mouth hardened. Fine. I love her. Brooke looked up at him, and something in her expression softened. It was painful to watch. Not because I still wanted Grant. That feeling had been gone long before Thanksgiving. It hurt because I recognized what he was doing. He was giving Brooke the words he had denied me for years, but he was giving them in front of me because he wanted to win. He was not choosing love. He was choosing control. He needed one woman to feel chosen, and the other to feel erased. Then he added, and I think it's time we stop pretending this marriage is working. The silence afterward was so complete I could hear the heat kick on in the hallway. Grant looked relieved after he said it. I think he believed he had finally taken the power away from me. He thought he had named the ending before I could. He thought this dinner was his stage. But I had not spent 6 weeks gathering paper because I was afraid of the truth. I had spent 6 weeks preparing for the moment he would finally say it out loud. I stood from the table and collected the empty salad plates. My hands were steady. That seemed to unsettle him more than anger would have. Are you seriously cleaning right now? He asked. We need to talk. I looked at him over my shoulder. You are right, I said. We do. Then I carried the plates into the kitchen, where the pecan pie waited beneath a glass dome. When I returned, I had 3 dessert plates in one hand and the slim leather folder in the other. Grant noticed it immediately. His eyes dropped to the folder, then rose to my face. Brooke followed his gaze. I set a slice of pie in front of her first. It was the same pie I made every Thanksgiving, with dark corn syrup, toasted pecans, and the pinch of salt Grant always claimed made it perfect. Then I placed a slice in front of him. Finally, I set the folder between them. What is that? Grant asked. Dessert, I said. He gave a dry laugh, but it sounded forced. Very funny. I thought so too, I said. A Thanksgiving dinner for 3. You brought the mistress. I brought the paperwork. Brooke stared at the folder without touching it. Grant reached for it, but I placed my hand on top first. Before you open it, I said, I want you to understand that I already made copies. Dana Rusk has copies. My accountant has copies. Everything is documented. Grant's face lost color, and for the first time since he walked through the door that morning, he looked afraid. You called a lawyer, he asked. I called someone who knows what financial abuse looks like when it is dressed up as responsibility. His jaw clenched. That is ridiculous. No, I said. What is ridiculous is telling your wife the kitchen floor can wait while you pay another woman's rent. What is ridiculous is telling me we cannot afford a child while you finance the life of the child you already had. What is ridiculous is sitting in my dining room and asking me to make this feel like family. Brooke reached for the folder then, but Grant caught her wrist. Don't, he said. The fear in his voice was sharp enough to cut through everything else. Brooke looked at him. Grant, she whispered, what is in there? He did not answer. He just kept holding her wrist as though silence could still protect him. I removed my hand from the folder and slid it toward Brooke. Open the smaller envelope first, I said. Grant stood so fast his chair scraped across the hardwood floor. Lila, don't do this. It was the first honest plea he had made all day. Not because he was sorry. Because he knew what came next. He knew exactly what the report said. He knew why Maisie's last name was Dane instead of Morgan. He knew how long he had been using words like fairness and family to hide a life built on both lies. Brooke opened the envelope with shaking fingers. And when she saw the laboratory letterhead, the room changed. Brooke did not scream when she read the report. That would have been easier somehow. Instead, she sat perfectly still, one hand pressed over her mouth, staring at the page as if the letters might rearrange themselves into a kinder truth. Her eyes moved from Grant's name to Maisie's name, and back again. Then she looked at him. You said the test was delayed, she whispered. You said the lab hadn't sent anything yet. Grant did not answer. He stood beside the table, with both hands clenched at his sides, looking less like a husband caught in a lie than a man angry that a locked door had opened. I was waiting for the right time, he said finally. Brooke laughed once, but there was no humor in it. The right time, her voice cracked on the words. You knew for 6 weeks. Grant stepped toward her, lowering his voice as though tenderness could still fix what calculation had broken. Brooke, I needed to sort things out first. You know my situation. He glanced at me then, and I understood exactly what he meant. His situation was not complicated. His situation was that he wanted a wife to maintain his life, a mistress to admire him, and a daughter he could claim only when it made him look generous. Brooke pushed the folder away from her as if it had burned her. You told me you were separated, she said. You said Lila knew it was over. Grant's face tightened. It was over. Emotionally, it has been over for years. I watched him say it with the same ease he used when selling a property he had barely visited. Grant did not lie like a man afraid of being found out. He lied like a man convinced that everyone else should accept his version once he said it confidently enough. That was how he had survived so long without ever taking responsibility. You were not separated, I said. You were married. You were living here. You were using our joint account. And you were telling me we had to cut back because the kitchen floor was not an emergency. Grant turned on me. Will you stop talking about the floor? He snapped. This is not about a floor. I met his eyes. No. It is about what you chose to repair, and what you chose to let rot. For the first time, Brooke looked at me not as an obstacle but as someone she might have underestimated. Grant tried to take the report from the table, but Brooke held on to it. How long have you been paying for Maisie? She asked. He paused. That pause told her more than any answer could have. I have helped when I could, he said. You know that. Brooke's face hardened. Since when? He looked toward the window. Since she was little. The room seemed to shrink around us. I thought of every conversation we had about children, every excuse about timing and money. Every time Grant held me after another failed cycle and promised we would find a way. You had a daughter while you were telling me we could not afford fertility treatment, I said. Grant's eyes flashed. That is not fair. I almost smiled. It was the first time he had used that word all day without trying to hide behind it. Fair. As though fairness had been waiting in the room for him. As though he had not spent 8 years dividing his life into separate rooms and locking each woman out of the other. You are right, I said quietly. It is not fair. It never was. Then I opened the larger folder and slid the bank statements toward Brooke, one clean stack at a time. She read the transfers slowly. The first dated back almost 7 years. Then came the apartment deposits, the school tuition payments, the utility bills, the medical reimbursements, and the car lease. Each line looked ordinary by itself. Together they told the story Grant had spent years trying to hide. Brooke's fingers trembled as she turned the pages. You paid all this from their account, she asked. From ours, I said. The account we used for our mortgage, our savings, our taxes. The account, he told me, was barely enough for the life we already had. Grant slammed his palm against the table. The wine glasses jumped. I supported my child, he said. That is what decent men do. His face was red now, his voice louder. You want to punish me for taking care of my daughter? Go ahead. Make me the villain, because I did not abandon her. The performance would have been convincing to someone who had not lived with him. He knew exactly where to put the weight in his voice, exactly how to make guilt sound noble. But I had spent too many years watching him turn his choices into my burden. No one is punishing you for supporting Maisie, I said. You should have supported her. You should have acknowledged her. You should have told the truth. What you did was steal from our marriage to build a secret family, then call me heartless when I noticed the money was missing. Grant stared at me, breathing hard. You are making this ugly. I looked down at the Thanksgiving table, the cold turkey, the untouched pie, the wedding china. You brought ugly into this house. I am only setting it where everyone can see it. Brooke stood abruptly, pushing her chair back. I need to leave. Grant reached for her arm again, but she pulled away before he could touch her. No, she said. You do not get to tell me when to stay anymore. Her voice was shaking, but it was steady enough. You told me she knew. You told me you were working things out. You told me you were trapped because she would ruin your life if you left. She looked at me, and the shame in her eyes was real now. I did not know he was taking money from you. I believed that she did not know everything. I did not forgive her. There was a difference. Brooke had known enough to understand she was part of something wrong, but Grant had fed her a version of the story, designed to keep her dependent, grateful, and afraid to question him. That was his pattern. He did not just betray people. He arranged their confusion so that they would defend him while he betrayed them. He gave everyone a different lie and waited for us to fight each other instead of looking at him. You should take the report, I told Brooke. And copies of these transfers. Grant turned toward me so quickly that his chair tipped backward. Absolutely not. His voice hit the walls like a thrown glass. Those are private financial records. I did not flinch. They are records of money taken from our marriage. She deserves to know what he used to buy her silence. Brooke looked at him, then at the documents. Was I your silence? She asked. Grant said nothing. That was the moment something inside her closed. She gathered the report, the copies, and her coat. At the doorway, she stopped beside me. I am sorry, she said so quietly that Grant could not hear every word. I did not know what to do with the apology. It was not enough, and it could never be enough. Still, I nodded once. Be sorry to Maisie, I said. Do not teach her that a man who hides her is protecting her. Brooke swallowed hard. Then she walked out of my house without looking back. The front door closed, and Grant stood in the dining room staring at it. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he turned on me with a look I had never seen before. Not anger alone. Panic. You had no right, he said. You had no right to put that in front of her. I picked up the empty dessert plates one at a time. You had no right to make me cook for her, I said. You had no right to make me carry your secrets like they were groceries. He followed me into the kitchen. You think you have won something? He asked. You think because you called a lawyer and printed some statements you get to destroy everything? I placed the plates in the sink and turned on the water. No, I said. I think you destroyed everything a long time ago. I just stopped cleaning up after you. His expression changed again, softening into the version of Grant that used to make me doubt myself. Lila, please. We can handle this privately. You do not need to make a war out of it. Privately, I repeated. Yes, we can separate. We can work out a settlement. But do not involve my family. Do not involve my firm. Do not turn this into something that follows Maisie forever. He stepped closer. You know what people are like. They will judge her. They will judge Brooke. Is that what you want? It was almost elegant the way he tried to turn his shame into a weapon against me. He wanted me to protect the child he had hidden even now by protecting the man who had hidden her. What I want, I said, is for Maisie to have a father who stops treating her like evidence. Grant went quiet. The next morning he left before dawn. He did not take much. A garment bag, 2 suitcases, his laptop, and the expensive watch he wore when he wanted people to think he was more successful than he felt. He did not leave a note. He sent a text from the driveway instead. "You have made this impossible." I stared at it for a long time. Then I forwarded it to Dana, along with every message he had sent since Thanksgiving. I was done letting his words vanish after they hurt me. By noon, his mother called. Marian Morgan had always spoken to me in a soft, disappointed tone, as if kindness were something she had mastered, and I had failed to learn. "Grant told me there was an incident," she said. "He says you humiliated him in front of that woman." I looked at the dead centerpiece still sitting on my dining room table. "He invited his mistress to dinner," I said. "He made me cook. Then he told me he loved her." Marian sighed. "Marriage is complicated, Lila. You do not throw away a family over one bad season." "He has an 8-year-old daughter," I said. Silence filled the line. When Marian spoke again, her voice was smaller. "Grant has a daughter. He has known for years. He has been using our money to support her and Brooke. I have the records." She did not accuse me of lying. That was what told me she already suspected something. Families often know more than they admit. Not the details, perhaps, but they know the shape of the silence. They know when a son has been protected too long. "Do not send me anything," Marian said after a moment. "I cannot be pulled into this." Then she hung up. That was the last time I tried to explain myself to anyone who wanted comfort more than truth. Dana filed the initial divorce petition the following Monday. She also arranged for a forensic accountant to review the marital accounts, because the transfers I had found were only the beginning. Grant had been careful, but he had not been careful enough. He had moved money through a line of credit connected to our home, then made partial repayments with bonuses he claimed were already spent on business expenses. He had not merely taken from our present. He had borrowed against our future without telling me. When Dana called with the full estimate, I sat at my desk at work after everyone had gone home. The amount was higher than I expected. It included rent, school, tuition, car payments, insurance, travel, and cash withdrawals that disappeared into places I could not yet identify. My hands went cold, but I did not cry. I had cried enough for the version of myself who thought being loved meant being endlessly understanding. This was not grief anymore. It was information. And information I had learned could become a kind of strength. Grant's response arrived 2 days later through his attorney. He wanted mediation immediately. He wanted a confidentiality agreement. He wanted me to agree that the financial records were misunderstood household contributions. Most of all, he wanted me to stop speaking to Brooke. Dana read the letter aloud over the phone, then paused. "He is trying to control the story before the facts are fully traced," she said. "That means he is afraid of what else will surface." I knew she was right. I had seen fear in his face on Thanksgiving. Then that Friday evening an envelope appeared in my mailbox. It was addressed in Grant's handwriting. Inside was a single printed photograph of Maisie standing beside him at a school carnival. He was smiling down at her, with one hand on her shoulder. On the back he had written, "She deserves a family that doesn't destroy her. Think about that before you keep going." I stood on the porch holding that photograph while the November wind moved through the bare trees. For years, Grant had taught me to mistake guilt for love. He had trained me to hear every boundary as cruelty, every question as betrayal, every act of self-protection as selfishness. This time I did not mistake the message for concern. I took a picture of the note. Then I called Brooke. When Brooke answered, she did not say hello. She said, "He sent you something, didn't he?" Her voice sounded exhausted, like she had not slept since Thanksgiving. I stood in my kitchen beside the window, holding Grant's photograph in one hand and my phone in the other. The pecan pie plate was still on the drying rack. I had not been able to put it away. "He sent me a picture of Maisie," I said, "and a note telling me I would destroy her if I kept going." Brooke was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "He sent me a message saying you threatened to take everything from him and leave Maisie without support." I closed my eyes. Of course he had. Grant had never needed people to believe the same lie. He only needed each person to believe the lie that made them easiest to control. "I never said that," I told her. "I would never say that." Brooke's breathing caught. I know, she said. I think I finally know a lot of things. She asked if we could meet somewhere public, not my house, not her apartment. We chose a coffee shop near the river halfway between our neighborhoods, where no one knew either of us. Brooke arrived 10 minutes early, wearing a gray coat and no makeup. She looked smaller than she had at my Thanksgiving table. Not innocent, not blameless. Just stripped of the story Grant had wrapped around her. She sat down across from me, placed her phone on the table and said, "There is something you need to see." For nearly an hour Brooke showed me messages Grant had sent over the last 2 years. Some were cruel in ways I expected. He called me cold whenever I questioned him. He said I cared more about spreadsheets than people. He told Brooke that I had made him feel trapped in a marriage, with no warmth left. But other messages were worse, because they revealed planning. He had told Brooke he was moving money before Lila can get difficult. He had promised her he would refinance the house once the timing is right. Then Brooke opened an email Grant had sent her 8 months earlier. The subject line read, "Future Plan." In it he explained that he intended to use additional equity from our home to buy a small condo in Brooke's name. He wrote that the house was mostly Lila's attachment anyway, and that I would eventually accept a settlement because I hate conflict too much to fight. I read the paragraph twice. It did not hurt in the way I thought it would. By then, pain had become something cleaner. It had become clarity. "There's more," Brooke said. She showed me screenshots of Grant telling her to keep all bills and lease paperwork in her name. He told her not to mention the car payments in texts. He told her that if anyone asked, he was simply helping a single mother out of kindness. Then there was one message that made both of us go silent. Grant had written, "Lila will fold once my mother talks to her. She always does. She hates being seen as the bad one." I stared at those words until the screen dimmed. For 13 years I had thought Grant knew me because he loved me. That afternoon I understood that he knew me because he had studied every soft place in me and learned how to press it. He knew I feared disappointing people. He knew I wanted to be fair. He knew I would carry guilt that belonged to someone else if it meant keeping peace. He had not mistaken those things for weakness. He had depended on them being weakness. And he had built his whole life around the belief that I would never stop. Brooke looked at me across the table. "I am not asking you to forgive me," she said. "I should have asked more questions. I should have walked away when he said he was married but unhappy. I wanted to believe him because Maisie liked him. She thought he was her hero." Her eyes filled but she wiped them quickly. "Now I have to explain to her why a hero hides." I did not know how to comfort her. I was not responsible for making this easier for Brooke. Still, I understood the grief inside that sentence. "I am not trying to take support from Maisie," I said. "But Grant does not get to use her to avoid accountability." Brooke nodded. "I know." Then she slid her phone toward me. I looked at the screen, then back at her. "This may make things public." Her expression tightened. "He made her a secret for 8 years. I am done helping him keep secrets. It was not a friendship. It was not forgiveness. It was simply 2 women refusing to let one man keep rewriting the truth." Dana's office was quiet when I brought in the screenshots the next morning. She read every message without interrupting. Then she leaned back in her chair and said, "This changes the negotiation." Grant's attorney had been framing the transfers as informal marital spending. The messages showed intent. They showed deception, concealment, and a plan to use our home equity for another household. Dana explained that the evidence would not make a judge punish Grant for having an affair. But it could make it impossible for him to pretend he had acted openly or fairly with our shared finances. 2 weeks later, Grant arrived at mediation, wearing a charcoal suit and the expression of a man who believed professionalism could erase misconduct. He did not look at me when he entered. His attorney, a stiff man named Harold Bean, greeted Dana with careful politeness and immediately began discussing reasonable closure. Grant had brought a folder of his own. I noticed it was thick, organized, and probably built to make him look prepared. For a second, I almost felt the old tremor of fear. Then I remembered his message. "Lila will fold." I sat down across from him. Grant began by offering me a settlement that sounded generous until Dana explained what it left out. He wanted to keep the house, assume the mortgage, and give me a small portion of the equity after offsetting his alleged business debts. He wanted confidentiality. He wanted no disclosure to his firm. He wanted the divorce completed quickly. In other words, he wanted the same thing he had always wanted: my cooperation in making his choices look clean. Dana did not raise her voice. She simply placed a binder on the conference table. Inside were the bank records, the line of credit statements, the lease payments, the car payments, the email about refinancing the house, and the screenshots of Grant predicting that I would give in. Harold Bean turned pages more slowly as he read. Grant watched his face, and that was when I saw the confidence drain out of him. Not all at once. It happened line by line, as the life he had hidden became too documented to deny. "This is being taken out of context," Grant said. Dana nodded slightly. "Then you can explain the context of moving marital funds through a home equity line while concealing the purpose from your spouse." Grant looked at me. "Lila, you know I was trying to do the right thing by my daughter." I did not look away. "Supporting Maisie was the right thing," I said. "Lying to me was not. Hiding debt against our home was not. Planning to put a condo in Brooke's name was not." His face tightened. "You are enjoying this." "No," I said. "I am finished with it." That was the first time Grant had nothing ready to say. Mediation lasted 9 hours. By the end of the day, Grant agreed to terms far different from the offer he had brought in. The forensic review made it clear that he had used our shared assets to fund his secret life, and the house could not simply become his reward for doing it. I kept the home. Grant accepted responsibility for the line of credit he had opened without my knowledge. He agreed to reimburse a substantial portion of the marital funds he had diverted, paid over time from future commissions and the sale of one of his investment accounts. Dana also removed the confidentiality clause Grant had wanted so badly. We did not need to announce every detail to the world. I had no interest in public humiliation for its own sake, but I refused to sign anything that required me to lie about why the marriage ended or protect Grant from questions he had created. The truth did not need a stage. It only needed room to exist, and for the first time in years, I was willing to give it that room. Grant called me 3 times after mediation. I did not answer. Then he sent a long email about how I had become someone he did not recognize. He wrote that I had changed. He wrote that I had turned cold. He wrote that he still hoped one day I would remember the good years and find compassion for him. I read it once, then forwarded it to Dana for the record. After that, I deleted it. I did not owe him a final argument. I did not owe him the soft version of myself he had spent years taking for granted. Marion called again a month later. Her voice was thinner this time. "Grant is struggling," she said. "He says you have shut everyone out." I stood in the living room, where the old kitchen floor had finally been replaced. The new wood was warm beneath my bare feet. "Grant is struggling because he cannot control the story anymore," I said. "That is not the same as being abandoned." Marion started to say something about family, but I stopped her. Family does not mean helping someone hide the harm they caused. She did not call again. Brooke and I never became close. That would have been dishonest. But she sent one message several months later to tell me that Maisie had started therapy and that Grant was seeing her regularly, with no more secrets and no more disappearing. He was still her father. He still had obligations. I hoped he would finally learn that being present was more than paying bills when it suited him. I did not need him punished forever. I needed him unable to use other people's pain as a shield against the consequences of his own choices. The following Thanksgiving I cooked again. Not because I had forgotten. Not because I had forgiven Grant. I cooked because I wanted to reclaim the kitchen from the memory of that day. I invited my aunt, Marlene, Dana, and her wife, my friend Nia from work, and Nia's father, who had nowhere else to go after his apartment building lost heat. We ate on the same wedding china. I made the same pecan pie, but this time every chair belonged to someone who had been invited with honesty. Before dessert, Aunt Marlene lifted her glass and looked around the table. "To using the good things," she said. Everyone smiled. I did too, but I felt something deeper than happiness. I felt relief. The kind that comes when you no longer have to earn the right to take up space in your own life. The kind that comes when you stop mistaking endurance for love. For years I believed silence made me dignified. Sometimes it did. But sometimes silence was just the room where other people stored the truth they did not want to face. I had not become cruel when I stopped protecting Grant. I had become honest. I had not destroyed a family by refusing to cover his lies. I had simply refused to keep living inside one built on them. Grant invited his mistress to Thanksgiving and made me cook for them. So I served dessert with divorce papers, bank records, and the DNA report he thought would keep him safe. and for the first time in 13 years, I left nothing at the table for him to take.